Good evening. I just got back home. It's almost 11:30 p.m. My life in Tokyo. But I want to talk tonight just for a little bit about a topic I have spoken about before, but it's not what you think. Or maybe it is. You know, to this day, I would say that my favorite album, CD, work of music in the, rock genre? It's not really rock though. But I mean non-jazz, non-classical per se genre by David Bowie. It's One Outside from 1995. It's just hands down One Outside. And also the Leon Sessions, which preceded it in 1994. And which to date have never been officially released, which is really too bad, you know? But yet, you know, I've realized this thing, which is that even the album itself, and the sessions are even more difficult in a way, because they're these long, sprawling improvs, you know? The album itself is very difficult. For some reason, for many David Bowie fans, or for many listeners generally who have sat down and given it a chance to grapple with. And from the very first time I listened to it and opened up the CD, it was a CD in 1995, I was in Japan for the first time, age 22, and I opened up the booklet and I looked at the artwork and I read the story and I read the lyrics, and I was already a Bowie fan, but it just like, holy shit, this is fucking amazing, I thought. And then, you know, it grew and grew on me. And then I read interviews about, you know, and then he was touring with 9 Inch Nails, and I got into 9 Inch Nails and electronic music more, industrial music more. From there I got into other artists like Coil and other more underground artists. But getting back to Outside, then I learned of the sessions, and I learned of Bowie's plans to do a trilogy, which never happened, or a triptych, whatever you want to call it. It's now 2024. Bowie died in 2016 after releasing another of his great late period works, Black Star, which is brilliant, absolutely, but in a very different way, a very different kind of album, although in some ways one might say that the connections between Black Star and Outside, that there are connections, but I don't want to sort of go that route talking about this. I mean, obviously the musicians are different, it's a different thing, but and Black Star is not a concept album in the same way, it doesn't have characters, and it's about half the length of Outside, slightly over maybe. What is it about this project that I keep coming back to? And this wasn't meant to be a talk about my tribute to this, although I've recently posted it to this page, and so it hasn't garnered that many hits, which is okay. You know, I mean, I've posted it piecemeal over the years, you could say, like in different ways, because there's This Chaos Is Killing Me, my recent cover of Hello Space Boy, which I did for This Dark Shroud. I posted 2 videos, one playing drums and the other the kind of finished final mix, with the kind of cover art I created. And but over the years, starting as early as 2018 or so, I started doing covers. I did Heart's Filthy Lesson, I did Voyeur of Utter Destruction is Beauty, and I did the following year I'm Deranged. And then in 2020, I did this kind of seg of my own called Nathan Adler Jr. Those things were released in one place. And then, you know, just smatterings of this and that. Last year for the September anniversary, I think 25th or 26th, the album was released in the US or something like that. And I released my Minotaur's Lair project, and even before that I had done Minotaur/artist on a 2-track EP that I released on January 8th of 2023. Later that year, September, I did the longer version. But then, so like I said, this talk is not just going to be about my tribute, or not even primarily necessarily, but just I realized that I had these earlier tracks, 2018, 19, 20, last year's stuff. Then I had the recent version of This Chaos Is Killing Me, and I did a remix of that, which I just took the main vocal line out basically, and beneath it I had been singing this medley of different songs from the Outside album primarily, so this version kind of emphasizes that. It's semi-instrumental, but there is some vocal stuff in there you can hear. And then I just put it all together with, like I say, just the earlier tracks, the later tracks, things from last year, this year, 2018, 19, 20. And realized I had almost 80 minutes worth of material. There are other things I left off actually that were outside related, and I put I'm Afraid of Americans. That's my bath. Other things like I'm Afraid of Americans, because that, actually the original version of that was recorded in 1994 with Brian Eno, and then it was re-recorded for the Earthling album, and then it was remixed by Trent Reznor at 9 Inch Nails, which is the version that you see in the video. Originally it was actually from the Outside sessions, so I thought it actually kind of belonged there, or it was, you know, could go there. My tribute also has We Miss You Spaceboy, which is an original song, and it has Minotaur's Lair. I think it ended up The Minotaur's Lair. It's actually Minotaur's Lair. It's kind of extended piece, and Strangers When We Improv, which is an improvisation based around strangers when we meet, but actually it's an improvisation with spoken word and other vocalizations. And it's, I called it Lights Out Boys. And you know, the motel has this line, and it's, that's really annoying. Sorry about that. I'll wait for that. This is what it sounds like in Japan, the bath, at least my place. The bath is finished, it says. Thank you. So, Lights Up Boys, and it's me exploding you, me exposing you, me exploding you. And I ended up calling it Lights Out Boys. Why is that? It's a good question. Feels like an end of an era, like it's lights out or something. I don't want to say that to be ultra uber pessimistic. Bowie was fairly pessimistic in 1995. The lyrics are very dark album. And you get quite dark lyrics all the way through Black Star. Obviously, that was his death album, so that's going to have some darkness to it. But also even, you know, The Next Day, and etc. So I called it Lights Out Boys. But I do think, going back to the original albums, I put that plural because there's Outside and there's the Leon Sessions, unofficially sort of released in various places on bootlegs and online. It's just been greatly influential on me, my sound, my way of thinking. I've developed my own sound over the years, and I work alone. I don't work with band members. There's no Brian Eno giving out, instruction cards of how to perform or giving ideas to images. There's no band around me. And as I started this talk in Tokyo, I'm pretty much alone all the time. And when I'm out on the trains and out in the city, it just feels like a complete disconnect. And Bowie was constantly talking about in interviews, and you could say that one of the major themes in his music, including Outside to some degree, I'll talk about that, but is, fragmentation. This, things just fragmenting, society fragmenting. And I think we're reaching the extreme end of this in 2024. Perhaps next year or the year after will be the peak of it, and it's not going to be fun, I think. But, so yeah. Outside is still very, very relevant, I think, thematically, musically. He covers so many styles on the Outside album. Not even talking about the Leon sessions, but you know, people have said, right, it's like jazz, rock, art rock, electronica, jungle music, or breakbeat, drum and bass, which he explored more fully on Earthling, although it was much more of a pop album. Industrial music, Nine Inch Nails influence, certainly. And Bowie listened to other things too, I believe. Other industrial music artists from, you know, back a bit further. Techno, I guess you could say, pop, of course, rock, of course, ambient sounds. You know, what is Wishful Beginnings? It's a stripped down thing with creepy sort of percussive reverberations and sort of very minimal with the vocals, right? And this, Bowie said he wanted to add layers to it, and Brian Eno said, no, let's leave it as it is, very minimal. The Motel, brilliant song, thanks in large part to Mike Garson's piano flourishes, Heart's Filthy Lesson, the whole storyline too. Ramona A. Stone, this futurist, half male, half female, half machine perhaps. Leon Blanc, who had been her boyfriend and is now accused of the murder of baby Grace Blue. Nathan Adler, who may himself be the murderer in the form of the Minotaur or the Minotaur, wearing this kind of bullhead thing, and I'm deranged and no control. And I love it. And I love the fact that it's a loose, I called it with John Maggiore, we talked about this. That interview will be published on his page, I think in a couple days actually. Although we conducted the interview over a month ago. I called the Outside album, and certainly the Leon sessions, a kind of baggy monster. Not a scary monster, a baggy monster, because it's loose and it's messy too. And I said that, I use that term, and I didn't mean that, and I don't mean that in a negative way, but it's just, there are a lot of loose ends intentionally, and the storyline, the concept is loose, and it's meant to be. It's fragmented like our lives and like life is. And we don't have the answers, and I'll just talk for a moment. I teach literature, and I'm teaching Brian Evanson's Fugue State, and I'm teaching contemporary work, right? And I'm teaching Stephen Millhauser's Disruptions, and those stories, they're short stories, both collections, but they're loose, baggy monsters, and students, especially the Evanson, can be quite difficult for students because of the philosophical underpinnings. But even the Millhauser is quite difficult, tricky. There's a lot of sort of irony in the tone of, you know, like we read something called The Circle of Punishment today, and it's, you know, the narrator is addressing a you, and the you has been accused of a crime that he or she may never have even done, and is being released from punishment, which could be this sort of horrible, violent thing. And toward the end, it's like, well, you think you're getting off the hook, but actually you'll be tortured with the guilt of what you did or didn't do for the rest of your life. Even if you commit another crime and you are punished, you'll still have the guilt from the original crime. So don't think you're getting off easy, kind of thing. So how do you sort of discuss a story like this? And the students in Japan are reading it in their second language, which is, their first language is not English. And I think the Outside album, of course, we're talking about sound. I don't want to say sound and vision, that sounds the cliche. And actually, that's not what I mean. It's the sound of the album and the storyline. And Bowie, of course, wrote the diaries of Nathan Adler, that bit that's in the booklet. And then also you get the segs between tracks. And those are actually more fragmentary than they were in some way on the Leon sessions. They're longer on the Leon sessions because he was improvising them, I guess, for the first time, and they're as is, and he had to shorten them up to make the segs, to make the whole thing make a little bit more sense. But what actually happened was that it made a little less sense to people, and they just wanted the songs. I think the Segs are great, but I actually like them better in some ways on the Leon album because they flow with the music. They're not separate at all from the music. The suites run for 20 some minutes each, and the Segs tend to come in and out of them kind of, you know, like this, and they're much longer and more detailed. There's more of the story that Bowie was, I guess, developing either in his head or on the spot while improvising. I think it was probably on the spot. You know, I improvise like this too, actually, obviously in my own style, in my own music, when I do spoken word or when I just sometimes sing things improv off the top tracks that I've made or something, or even a cappella, and then later add things. So I think that's what he was doing there. But there's more to them, and then they were shortened up for the Outside album. They're great songs on the album: Heart's Filthy Lesson, Hello Space Boy, The Motel, Through These Architects' Eyes. Strangers When We Meet was an outtake from, or not an outtake, but was a remake or a re-recording of a song from Buddha of Suburbia, of course, and ends the album. And it's a kind of romantic, new wave sounding song that I think is great. Many people think it doesn't fit. I think it's a nice bookend to an otherwise chaotic album. In some ways, you could say, but the chaos is killing me. The chaos is the theme in a way. And of course, there's the art murder, art crime, and there are all kinds of textual, sub-stories, there's all these little rabbit holes one can go down within the storyline, which is, again, a loose, baggy monster. And it's open for us to interpret, just like Brian Evanson's fiction is, or Stephen Millhouse's fiction is, or Paul Auster, rest in peace, this City of Glass, New York trilogy. It's very postmodern, the Outside story, and the music is too, if you will. The music is outside. The music is underground. The music is where the outsiders are. And Bowie was always sort of flirting with both sides of that, you know, the being an outsider, being an uncompromising artiste, as Ramona A. Stone pronounces it on the album, and being more mainstream, more sort of accessible, and not only in the 80s, but even in the 70s and beyond, in the 90s and 2000s to some extent. I think he was uncompromising in many ways at times, and at other times he compromised, which isn't to say, I'm not saying that's bad, but he was able to kind of do it in a way that was, so make things accessible, but also they still were artistic and they still were true to his vision, although in the 80s he lost that a bit. That's another story. Tin Machine actually was a necessary transitional phase. I don't think that Tin Machine was bad. I think Tin Machine was meant to be something that a violent destruction, you know, the phoenix rises from the ashes, and the phoenix rose from the ashes of Tin Machine to become David Bowie circa 1990, well, I could say 94, 95, even 93, the Buddha of Suburbia, and so on. So, and then from there on. So anyway, the reason I'm thinking about Outside again, one of the reasons, apart from the fact that I recently covered Hello Space Boy for This Dark Shroud, recently put up the One Outside tribute compilation, which again comes from various songs that, We Prick You is on there too. I did that actually, I put 2024, it was released at the beginning of this year, on the We Miss You Space Boy tribute on his birthday again, 2024, but I recorded that actually at the end of last year, so that's quite recent too. But that wasn't part of the Outside tribute album, it came later. I kind of rushed that out, if you will. It wasn't rushed in that sense, but it's only 40 minutes because I want to get it out on September 25th or whatever, and I had to kind of finish it quickly. But I'm very happy actually with that. Particularly the two main longer tracks, which is the Minotaur's Lair and Strangers When We Meet, both of which are on this compilation. But the other reason I was thinking about Outside, apart from that, it's not yet September, right? Just something popped into my feed today. This guy who was reviewing it in 2021, listening for the first time ever, apparently, and reviewing it like as you listen kind of things. They do these things on YouTube. It was pretty cool. I guess he had reviewed like every single Bowie album one by one. It was the first time listening to them, most of them anyway. Outside it was, you know, I mean, I've been listening to that since, I guess, October of 1995. It came out late September, and I realized that it was available in October when I went to the CD store to get a King Crimson live double CD. It was my first year in Japan and CD era, right? And so I went out and I actually didn't buy the CD because I saw the Bowie, and I bought the Bowie first. I bought the King Crimson several weeks later and was sort of disappointed in it, but the Bowie became a staple in my listening, rotation. Even today, I don't listen to it all the time, obviously, but I've covered many of the songs, and I've done talks on it, and I've done tributes in various ways, and the improvisations from Leon have certainly been influential on me and my improvisational style I've developed for myself. But yeah, that popped into my feed. He was reviewing and talking about the storyline, how confused he was, but then he got these comments, and he's reading the comments. This means this, that means that, or this is interpreted by XX viewer as this or that. And I ended up watching a whole hour plus thing and just laughing and almost crying and just feeling nostalgic about it, and then came home and decided to do this talk. And I'll end on a personal note, apart from outside and Bowie and all that and music stuff. So yeah, again, going back to where I started, let's cycle back around. This is my life in Tokyo. And you want to talk about fragmentation in Bowie's work. And he lived in New York City, but he lived with Iman, his wife, and his daughter, and I live alone for 4 years. So it's a really hard place here to meet people. People don't make eye contact. I think that's the reason I'm wearing the sunglasses and even not looking at the camera. It's a kind of Tokyo thing, which is not good. I look at people in the eye when I'm talking to them, and I don't have my sunglasses on, you know. I'm not trying to hide my eyes from people, but on the trains, everyone's got their noses in their phones anyway, and nobody really talks, and if they do, it's like they're chatting loudly with their buddy kind of thing, occasionally younger people or something. But basically in Tokyo, people keep to themselves. They have their noses in their phones, or they're reading a book, or they're sleeping on the trains. And even outside the trains, obviously, I mean, there's not that you're going to meet people on the trains, but there's very little communication between strangers. We're all strangers when we meet in Tokyo. That's a really good one for Tokyo. But of course, that's about, right, someone you were very close with, and now we're strangers when we meet. But in Tokyo, everyone's strangers when they meet. Maybe. In a way. So this has become my life. Really solitary life. But I still got David Bowie's outside, and I still have my music, and my creativity, and my classes, and my literature, my Brian Evanson, and my Stephen Milhauser, and we did Hemingway's The Killers today, my Hemingway, or my Sherwood Anderson, whatever I happen to be teaching on any given week in my American Lit course, and next semester, my Japanese Lit course, my Dazai Osamu, and my Abe Kobo, certainly, and my maybe Murakami Haruki, or whatever, Natsume Soseki, Yaktagawa Ryunosuke. And my creativity, I'll say it again, not only music, these videos, and my friends, and my daughter, and my family in the US. And I mean, it's the thing, you know? I'm alone, I'm not alone. I'm not alone, but I'm alone. But no man is an island, right? Though some of us may be living on what feels like a deserted island, surrounded by water. If I metaphorize that, that's the people who are just flowing, moving by, strangers, always strangers when we meet. I'm so thankful that we're strangers when we meet. I'm in clover, but we're strangers when we meet. He'll head over, for we're strangers when we meet. Strangers when we meet. Strangers when we meet.